Good evening. Thanks for joining us. Saying I've got overwhelming support and I've got to finish the job. President Biden has just wrapped up a press conference which began with 8 minutes of prepared remarks, followed by more than 50 minutes of unscripted Q&A until just now. Starting us off tonight, CNN Chief National Affairs Correspondent Jeff Zeleny, CNN Political Director David Chalian, Ashley Etienne, who served as Communications Director for Vice President Harris, former Republican Congressman Adam Kinzinger, CNN's Manu Raju at the Capitol, and Democratic strategist Paul Begala. David Chalian, let me start with you. Did the president put concerns about his candidacy to rest tonight enough?
Well, certainly not. He obviously was up there for nearly an hour and was able to speak on a variety of topics, but he spoke in sort of the way we've come accustomed to hearing Joe Biden. Certainly nothing that resembled what occurred on the debate stage, but obviously still at times rambling, at times mixing up words. That last question you heard about at the very top of the presser, mixing up saying Vice President Trump instead of Vice President Harris. But I think, Anderson, what was most telling for me from this, you asked the question, did he assuage concerns? He actually himself acknowledged that he is still on a mission of trying to allay concerns, as he said. And I thought that was very telling because a week ago in that George Stephanopoulos interview, we heard a defiant President Biden. We heard somebody who said this conversation about whether I'm going to be the nominee or not is over. I have decided. He said that at the Wisconsin rally last Friday. That was not, my observation was he was in a bit of a different headspace tonight. He certainly said, I am keeping on. We are going to keep on moving through this. He said he is going to continue to run this race. But it was a different tone on that stuff that seemed to open the idea. He said he doesn't think he's the only one that can beat Donald Trump. He said nobody yet has presented him with evidence that he doesn't have a viable winning path to the presidency. Well, that still may come. That seems to me that he was sort of opening up some metrics that he's willing to consider, perhaps. This was not a president who was shutting down the notion and the conversation, or a president that seemed unaware that his party is still looking for him to grapple with this decision, and they don't consider it closed. And I think tonight we saw him in a different headspace about this.
Paul Begala, what did you see?
I saw substantive mastery. I mean, my goodness, it was a tour de force and a tour of the world. We talk a lot, of course, about NATO and Ukraine, but about China, about Israel, Gaza. He seemed to have the substance really at his command. Stylistically, though, you still had the soft voice. You didn't have the kind of catastrophic failure he had at the debate, but you also didn't have the same sort of command that he had at his inaugural. So the substance was great, the style not. He is already getting static for slipping and saying Vice President Trump, which, anybody could do that, Tucker. You just get a name wrong.
Thanks, James Carville. So, Ashley, what did you make of the news conference?
I think David's a bit of a Debbie Downer. So far, what I've heard is like a little Debbie Downer. I thought the president was incredibly strong. He was very forceful, deep on the substance in terms of foreign policy and domestic policy. I think he definitely bought himself some more time tonight. But I'm not sure that the bleeding will stop. What I'm hearing from members on the Hill is that there's deep frustration with how the president and his team have handled this situation. I maintain that it was a mistake for the president not to go up to the caucus meeting this week, or not at the very least to call into the caucus. This is a family matter. He should have addressed it in that way. But today's performance was incredibly strong. It bolsters his point that he had a bad debate night. We've now seen him in a press conference and interview and at rallies, and he seems a bit incredibly strong. But here's the outstanding thing, Anderson. The president now has to prove that he can unite this party, and not just unite the party, but to inspire the party to get behind him and refocus our efforts on Donald Trump. And that's the challenge before the president now.
Jeff, you've been reporting all day on this. How does the president's performance tonight square with the reporting you've been doing?
Anderson, there's no doubt that he has a command of these issues, something that he has dealt with really for decades. But that really wasn't the overall purpose of the press conference. Just talking to a senior Democratic advisor who is in close touch with many Hill Democrats tells me this: I don't think anyone from the Hill is going to stand down after this. So the big question here tonight is, did this stop the bleeding?
Meaning anyone
buy
on
him
the
more
Hill who
time?
wants him to
Right.
Meaning anyone on the Hill who wants him to go is going to stand down.
Right. Exactly. We've heard so many Democrats who've been saying, like, wait and see. Let's wait and see how he does. They have concerns on the campaign. This is unlikely to change the trajectory of that. David Chalian is correct in terms of us reading the tone. Not as combative, not as defiant. I actually asked one of his advisors about that. They chalked it up to the setting of NATO, that he was at this press conference. We will see, but he definitely was even open to, at the very end there, a reporter asked if he was open to letting his delegates to do whatever they choose, and he said he was. So we will see going forward here if he returns that combativeness. But we are in a very different place than we were at the beginning of the week when he was very defiant on Morning Joe, and he has learned a lot this week, including from former Speaker Nancy Pelosi. Those words and the fact that they are likely to speak in the coming days, if not tomorrow, that is going to determine the support among Democrats for him going forward here. So, yes, the press conference, I've covered a lot of his press conferences. It was fine. But tonight, fine is likely not good enough to change this trajectory, Anderson.
Manu, what are you hearing tonight from lawmakers?
Yeah, there's signs that those calls for him to step aside are not going to go away, despite what Democrats say was a better performance, of course, than the debate from 2 weeks ago. In fact, just moments ago, right after this press conference ended, Jim Himes, who is a top Democrat on the House Intelligence Committee, just put out a statement calling on Joe Biden to step aside from this race. He writes in a statement, Anderson, he says that he praises Joe Biden's legacy, his record. He says it's because of those traits and in consideration of that legacy that I hope President Biden will step away from the presidential campaign. He goes on to say that the 2024 election will define the future of American democracy, and they must put forth the strongest candidate possible to confront the threat posed by Trump's promised MAGA authoritarianism. So that is in line with what I've been hearing going into this press conference. Jim Himes becomes the 15th member of Congress to call for Joe Biden to step aside. 14 before this press conference, but there was an expectation that there would be more afterwards. They were going to give Joe Biden at least the opportunity to make the argument, even if they had made their mind up already privately, and the discussion privately has been much more intense than what we have seen publicly. And the public discussion, of course, has been intense, but there's been so much concern about Biden, that Biden's not just his debate performance, but how that has been baked into the electorate, and that it's something that they believe he can't overcome ahead of a critical election. So expect more names, significant names. Jim Himes is someone who has sway within the Democratic Party, has a lot of influence among the House Democrats. Expect many more to come forward, either to go close to the line of saying he should consider stepping aside, or saying he should step aside altogether. But as Joe Biden indicated at that press conference, he has no plans to at the moment. He says that watch me on the campaign trail. So it could take another couple of weeks for this all to play out, Anderson. But as they move closer and closer to the convention, it's going to get harder and harder to find any new candidate to replace Joe Biden.
Simona, I just wanted to confirm Jim Himes' statement, Congressman Himes' statement, that was released after the press conference, like seconds after the press conference.
Seconds after. There's a post at 8:29 p.m. Eastern, Anderson. So this was ready to come out pretty much when this is done. And he makes it very clear. He says his accomplishments are immense. His legacy as a great president is secure. He must not risk that legacy, urging him to step aside, Anderson.
Congressman Kinzinger, what did you see tonight? What do you think happens now?
Yeah, look, I think it was fine. But, we wouldn't even, we'd be looking at the next, cat video on the internet if it wasn't for what happened at the debate. And so I think everybody was kind of looking at this press conference saying, this is going to be the magical thing that changes the discussion. It's not. It's going to have to be, if Biden decides to stay in this race, it's going to have to be a number of things like this. It's going to have to be a lot of traveling, a lot of activity for people to slowly kind of regain that trust that, okay, that debate was a simple fluke.